jacket. Hi.
I guess the obvious is, why did you want to go with Deron Payne there?
Well, we really like Deron. Coming out as a junior, he's only 20 years old, big, strong, physical guy. You see what's going on in our division with Saquon Barkley and Zeke Elliott and Philadelphia, the way they run the ball. And our ranking on defense wasn't quite up to speed at 32nd, and we feel like Deron, paired with Jonathan Allen and the rest of the guys, Stacey McGee and Matt and Terrell, Anthony, I think is a perfect fit.
Jay, when you got to 13 and you've got Derwin James, Tremaine Edmonds also on the board with Deron Payne, what was the conversation like in the room getting to Payne?
Yeah, there's quite a few guys that were worthy of that pick, quite frankly. But for what we were looking for and the fit, I think Deron is perfect for us, what we were looking for. Derwin James is a great player. Edmonds is a great player. Both Edmonds brothers are great players. But for what we were looking for, all the work we've done on Deron Payne, I think Coach Tom Sula felt very good. Kyle felt very good. Doug Williams felt very good. I think the room was unanimous in who we should take.
So he was at the top of the draft board for that pick?
Yeah, he was up there. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios we tried to play through, and guys were getting picked, and you know, we're happy as heck to get Deron. He's one of our top guys.
So what is it about Alabama guys?
Well, he's played 3 years at Alabama, been to 3 national championships and won 2. He's a big part of that. He's a leader of their defensive line last year. Played with Jonathan, obviously. Jonathan knows him very well. Ryan Anderson speaks very highly of him, obviously. And, you know, I think camaraderie, the ability that he can play a lot of multiple spots, not just nose guard. He's not just a run stopper. I know he didn't have a lot of sacks last year, but he can disrupt the passing game. If you watch him against Georgia, you might say he's the best defensive lineman in football. You know, he was very disruptive in the running and the passing game, and it's going to be hard to move those guys. And at the end of the day, pro football is about being able to run the ball and stopping the run, and we have to stop the run better, and Deron Payne will help us do that.
There's always, you mentioned the sacks, there's always some projection here. 3 sacks in 3 years, though. Mm-hmm. You know, those numbers weren't there. What did you see out of him that makes you think, you know, at 13, you want somebody who can do both, I would assume. What did you see out of him that makes you think that you can get the pass rush out of him? He
can get back there. You know, I think he's got great power, and a lot of times the sacks that don't show up on the stat board, he enables other guys to get them because of the push of the pocket. It forces a quarterback outside. I think Ryan Kerrigan, Preston Smith, I think, and Ryan Anderson will be very happy to have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne in the middle pushing that pocket. It enables the edge rushers to get home a little bit. So he's been very productive for Alabama. I promise you that, not just in the running game, but in the passing game. And stats don't always tell a story about pass rushers. And I think being a 20-year-old kid, as strong as he is, as big as he is already, he's got room to grow. Having Coach Tom Sula work with him, I think it's going to be a great match. It'll be fun to watch.
Was there any thought to a trade?
Yeah, there's thought to everything. You know, everything is running through our minds, and the phones are ringing a little bit here and there. But at the end of the day, we saw that he was on the board, and that's the guy we wanted. And you risk, if you trade back, you risk losing him and everybody else that you covet. But he's one of the main guys that we coveted throughout this draft process, and we're happy that he fell to us.
Jay, you touched on this a little bit, but how versatile do you see Payne being within your scheme, both as in 3-down sets and 4-down nickel situations?
Very versatile. He can play nose, 3, 5. And he did that at Alabama, you know, and you look at tape when he played with Jonathan. I can remember watching Jonathan. I love Jonathan Allen, but I don't know who this 94 guy is. He was an underclassman last year, and it was Deron, and putting some of that tape on from a year ago, watching those two guys side by side working. It's tough sledding. They're both very strong at the point of attack. They eat up defensive linemen, and I think it's going to make Mason and Zach a lot more comfortable and free to roam around the field. And it'll make Zach a lot more comfortable to use his speed, lateral speed.
I know you need to get him on the field before you really decide, but is he a guy you're thinking of maybe trying at that nose tackle position first fill that hole in there?
Who's that?
Duran.
Put him in nose?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll start him at nose, see how he goes. But like I said, when teams move their tight ends and noses shift to three techniques shift to nose, I mean, I think he's very versatile. And at Alabama, he's played directly over the nose center, and he's played the shade, he's played the three, he's played a little bit of everything. So, and he's a very smart player. We had a chance to interview him, and we had a chance to meet him in one of the visits that we had him here. And just a great guy. He's got great leadership capabilities, very smart, knows what the entire defensive line's doing. And if you watch him on tape, you can see that he never gets out of his gap. He knows where he's supposed to be. He looping three technique when he has to loop. He's in the A gap when he's in the A gap. He's in the B gap when he's in the B gap, and he doesn't give up a lot of movement. He rarely gets pushed out of his gap. Very strong and just a great all-around defensive lineman.
Jay, back in free agency, there were questions about whether you guys would go after a nose tackle or a defensive tackle. At that point, there were some guys out there. Obviously, you didn't. You get one here. How much did seeing the draft and seeing that you might be able to get a guy like Payne where you were, how much did that impact the decisions back in free agency?
It had some impact, but not total impact. We looked at free agency. We talked about a lot of the defensive linemen that were out there, and they chose to go to the teams, or we couldn't get a deal done or what have you. But at the end of the day, we did feel good about the team that we had already with Philip Taylor coming back also, and we got a good group of guys in-house. But to add somebody of Duran's ability is hard to pass up. The strength of good football teams are the offensive line and defensive line, and I feel like we got a lot stronger adding Duran.
He actually told us, via conference call that he felt like it was family here when he was up here. So how important is it for you guys to bring in a player that can come in and play with guys that he played with in college, but just be able to have some kind of camaraderie already coming in as a rookie?
Yeah, I think he's got the personality. He would have fit anywhere, quite honestly. I mean, he's that type of guy. He's got a great personality, and people, like to be around him. So, but having familiar faces for him coming in as a 20-year-old kid to the NFL, I think it's to be a lot more comfortable for him. And obviously having Coach Tom Sula, Coach Minuski working with him, it'll be a great fit. And the great thing about he and Jonathan are you don't have to kick them in their rear end and say, hey, we need to hustle, we need to pick it up. These guys play hard every snap, and that is fun to watch.
Jay, can you give us a little insight into the room as what was the feel as some of those quarterbacks were going, a couple offensive line? Could you guys see that guys are getting pushed back to you?
Yeah, for sure. We're anxiously waiting to see what was going on because, you have no way of knowing. You take your top 13 guys or 14 or 15, and depending on if there's a chance to trade back or what have you, and you just keep crossing them off, and the guys that you really want, they're still there. There's a couple opportunities for us to really make our football team better. At the end of the day, we had to make a decision, and Duran was a unanimous decision amongst the room, and an easy call for us.
Jay, other than getting best football players left on the board, what do you hope to accomplish tomorrow and in the later rounds? Yeah,
it's hard to say right now. Obviously, we hope to accomplish getting a good player that's healthy and loves football. That's the number one thing. But, you just have no way of knowing. There's 13 more picks or 12 more before we pick tomorrow, and a lot of good players are still left, but 12 more good ones are going to be taken. So we'll wait and see what's left on the board and make a great decision that's best for this football team.
How much did Payne's ability to kind of maybe slot in and play right away figure into this decision to where maybe if you pick someone like James, he'd be competing with Nicholson and Swearinger or anything like that?
Yeah, I think really you couldn't go wrong with either pick. They're both great players, and there's a couple other really good ones that were left on the board also, and there's still some good ones. So, for what we were looking for, the evaluations that we did, we thought Payne was the best fit.
Quick follow-up on that. With Vea being off the board, did that make it easier too? You didn't have to, with Vita Vea off the board, just like the pick before, did that make it?
Yeah, he's obviously was in the mix too. We were talking about him and evaluated him, but when guys go before you, we just cross them off the list. It's a heck of a deal. And when guys are left that we really, really like and we're able to get them, it's exciting. And we're excited as heck to get Duran.
Obviously, you guys do your own evaluations and trying to figure out what your value on a player is, but how much do you pay attention to, whether it's mock drafts or trying to gather intel and things like that, and trying to determine whether you could have potentially traded back and still gotten a guy like Duran? Because he was a guy that seemed to fall in some of the mock drafts to later teens, early 20s even, and you obviously want to get maximum value. So how does that process work in trying to evaluate exactly where you take a guy, even if you have your own value for him?
We glance at the mock drafts, but they're called mock drafts for a reason. It's kind of like fantasy football. It's fantasy world. You know, how many mock drafts have been correct so far? 0? So we don't take a lot of stock in that. The important thing is you do your work on the evaluation process, and then you wait on draft day and see who's interested in making trades. The phone rings, you get an offer, or you make an offer, and they either accept it or you don't accept it. So we had the phone was ringing, not only when we were picking, but when other teams were picking, and we just chose to stay pat and take Mr. Payne. All right.